The runway is right there, close enough to see individual markings on the pavement, close enough to count the threshold lights, but everything is wrong. The aircraft is too high, too fast, not aligned with the center line. The approach is completely unstable, violating every parameter in the book. Any pilot with even basic training knows what must happen now. Go around. Add power. Climb away. Set up for another attempt. The first officer's voice cuts through the cockpit. Go around. We need to go around. Her tone is urgent, professional, but edged with growing fear. She can see what is about to happen. She knows they cannot land safely from this approach. She is trained, qualified, following the procedures exactly as the manuals prescribe. But the captain does not respond. He does not add power. He does not initiate a climb. His hands remain on the controls, fighting to salvage an approach that cannot be salvaged, trying to force an aircraft onto a runway it should never touch. His pride, his stubbornness, his refusal to admit he has made an error, all of it converging into a decision that will kill everyone aboard in the next 15 seconds. Go around! Go around now! The first officer is no longer asking. She is demanding, her voice breaking with desperation. She reaches for the throttles herself, trying to save them, trying to do what her captain refuses to do. Too late. Before I walk you through exactly what happened in those final seconds, if you want to understand how experienced pilots can make fatal decisions under pressure, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This story will shock you, and the investigation findings are something every person who flies needs to understand. I am Captain Paul Henderson. 25 years in commercial aviation have taught me many things, but perhaps the most important lesson is this. There is no shame in a go-around, none whatsoever. Every pilot, from the newest first officer to the most experienced captain, will eventually find themselves on an unstable approach. Weather changes, winds shift, aircraft ahead on the runway does not clear in time, equipment malfunctions. 1,000 different factors can make an approach unstable. When that happens, there is only one correct response. Go around, add power, climb away, live to try again. It is one of the simplest, most fundamental procedures in all of aviation. Children playing flight simulator games understand the concept. Yet time and time again, experienced professional pilots refuse to execute a go-around when it is clearly necessary, and that refusal kills people. Today I'm going to tell you the story of Korean Air Flight 801 and how a captain's stubborn refusal to go around, despite repeated warnings from his crew and clear violations of approach parameters, resulted in one of the deadliest crashes in aviation history. This is a story about authority gradient, about cultural factors in cockpit dynamics, about complacency, and about how pride can override training and common sense with catastrophic results. Welcome aboard. August 6, 1997. A Wednesday evening, Gimpo International Airport in Seoul, South Korea. Korean Air Flight 801 is preparing for a long-haul flight to Antonio B. Pat International Airport in Guam, a United States territory in the Western Pacific. The flight will take approximately 4.5 hours, carrying passengers and crew across the ocean to the tropical island that serves as a hub for tourism and military operations. The aircraft is a Boeing 747-300, one of the iconic jumbo jets that defined long-haul aviation for decades. Registration Hotel Lima 7468. This particular aircraft is 12 years old, with over 25,000 hours on the airframe, mechanically sound, well-maintained, showing no deficiencies in the pre-departure inspection. 254 people board the aircraft, South Korean business people heading to meetings, families beginning vacations, American military personnel and their families traveling to or from duty stations, Japanese tourists connecting through Seoul for Guam's beaches. They settle into their seats for the overnight flight, many planning to sleep through the journey and wake up in paradise. The flight crew consists of 3 pilots as required for long-haul operations. Captain Park Yong-chul occupies the left seat. He is 42 years old, a former fighter pilot in the Republic of Korea Air Force, who transitioned to commercial aviation. He has approximately 8,800 hours of total flight time, with nearly 2,000 hours in the Boeing 747. He is experienced, technically proficient and confident, perhaps too confident. First Officer Song Kyung-ho sits in the right seat. He is 40 years old with over 5,000 hours of total time and 1,500 hours in the 747. He is competent, professional, knows the aircraft well. The flight engineer is Nam Suk-hoon, 41 years old, responsible for monitoring the aircraft systems from his panel behind and between the two pilots. In the Boeing 747 of this era, flight engineers were still required crew members, managing fuel, hydraulics, electrical systems, and other complex aircraft functions. The cabin crew consists of 14 flight attendants, responsible for the safety and comfort of the passengers in the multiple decks and cabins of the massive aircraft. At 8:27 in the evening local time, Flight 801 pushes back from the gate. The departure is routine. They taxi to the runway, receive clearance and take off into the night sky, climbing westward over the Sea of Japan toward the Pacific. The flight proceeds normally for the next 4 hours. The crew settles into the routine rhythm of long-haul operations. They monitor systems, communicate with air traffic control at various waypoints, serve meals to passengers, dim the cabin lights for those who want to sleep. Everything is professional, unremarkable, exactly as it should be. But as they approach Guam, factors begin to align that will turn this routine flight into a disaster. First, the weather at Guam is deteriorating. Heavy rain showers are moving through the area. Visibility is reduced. Clouds are low. Not unusual for a tropical island, but it means the approach will require more attention and precision than in clear conditions. Second, and critically, the instrument landing system for runway 6 left at Guam, the primary runway they plan to use, is out of service for maintenance. The glide slope component, which provides vertical guidance to help pilots maintain the correct descent angle during the approach, is not functioning. This means they will need to fly a non-precision approach, which requires more pilot skill and vigilance because they will not have automated vertical guidance. The crew is informed of the glide slope outage. They acknowledge and brief the approach they will fly instead, a VOR DME approach to runway 6 left. This is a perfectly acceptable procedure that pilots train for regularly. It is more demanding than a precision approach, but well within the capabilities of any qualified crew. However, the approach to runway 6 left at Guam has another characteristic that makes it particularly challenging. The airport is located in hilly terrain. There are significant obstacles, hills and radio towers in the approach path. Pilots must carefully manage their descent to ensure they clear these obstacles while also positioning themselves to land on the runway. The margin for error is smaller than at airports in flat terrain. As they begin their descent toward Guam, Captain Park is the pilot flying. First Officer Song is handling radio communications and monitoring. Flight Engineer Nam is managing systems and also monitoring the approach. The approach briefing is conducted. They review the procedure, the minimum descent altitude, the missed approach procedure if they need to go around. Everything seems professional and thorough, but then small errors begin to accumulate. Captain Park programs the flight management computer with incorrect data, setting a descent angle that is too steep. First Officer Song notices the error, but does not forcefully correct the captain. Korean culture places enormous emphasis on respect for authority and seniority. Directly contradicting a senior captain, especially one who was a military fighter pilot, goes against deeply ingrained cultural norms. So Song mentions the error softly, indirectly, not wanting to cause the captain to lose face. Park dismisses the comment and continues with his programming. The error remains uncorrected. As they descend through the clouds toward Guam, other issues emerge. The crew is fatigued. This is the end of a long flight. They have been on duty for many hours. Their alertness is degraded. Park, in particular, seems less sharp than he should be, missing call-outs, not responding quickly to changing conditions. The weather is worse than expected. Heavy rain pounds the windscreen. Visibility is poor. They are flying through solid clouds with no visual reference to the ground. They are entirely dependent on instruments. And then they realize they are not where they think they are. The navigation is off. They have drifted from the approach course. Park makes corrections, but they are now rushed behind the aircraft, reacting instead of proactively managing the approach. First Officer Song is becoming increasingly concerned. The approach is not stabilized. They are too high, the descent rate is too steep, they are not properly aligned with the runway. He knows they should go around, but speaking up to challenge the captain is extraordinarily difficult in the hierarchical Korean cockpit culture. He tries indirect language first. The weather is really bad, Captain. This is a hint, a subtle suggestion that perhaps they should consider abandoning this approach, but Park does not take the hint. He continues the approach. They descend through the minimum descent altitude, the lowest altitude they are legally allowed to fly without having the runway in sight. They still cannot see the runway. This alone requires an immediate go-around. Regulations are clear. If you reach minimums and do not have the runway environment in sight, you must go around, no exceptions. Song's voice becomes more urgent. Runway not in sight. We should go around. Park does not respond. He continues descending, now below the minimum altitude, violating regulations, putting the aircraft into terrain where obstacles exist that they cannot see. The ground proximity warning system activates. A computerized voice fills the cockpit. Terrain ahead. Pull up. Terrain ahead. Pull up. This is one of the most serious warnings in aviation. It means the aircraft is dangerously close to terrain and an immediate climb is required to avoid impact. The correct response is instant aggressive action, full power, pitch up, climb at maximum rate. But Captain Park does not respond. He continues the approach, now actively ignoring a critical safety warning. First Officer Song is nearly shouting now. "Go around, Captain, go around!" Flight Engineer Nam joins in from his panel. "We need to climb, pull up!" But Park remains fixated on trying to land. He can see some lights now through the rain. He thinks he can see the runway. He is determined to complete this approach, to land this aircraft, to avoid the embarrassment of a go-around. What he does not realize is that the lights he sees are not the runway. They are lights from the town of Nimitz Hill, an area of higher terrain short of the airport. He has descended into an area with obstacles, hills rising to over 600 feet, radio towers, all of it invisible in the rain and darkness. The ground proximity warning continues. Pull up, pull up, pull up. Song reaches for the throttles, trying to add power himself, trying to save them. But Park pushes his hands away, insisting he has the runway, insisting he can land. And then, at 1:42 in the morning local time, with the ground proximity warning still screaming, Korean Air Flight 801 impacts Nimitz Hill approximately 3 miles short of the runway. The aircraft is in a slight descent, flying at 220 knots when it strikes trees and terrain at an elevation of about 660 feet. The impact is catastrophic. The right wing hits first, shearing off as it strikes trees and the hillside. The force tears the wing from the fuselage, rupturing fuel tanks. The aircraft breaks apart, sections of fuselage tumbling down the hillside. Fire erupts immediately as thousands of gallons of jet fuel ignite. The 747 disintegrates across the jungle-covered hill. The cockpit section separates and comes to rest inverted. The center fuselage breaks into multiple pieces. The tail section tears away. Wreckage and debris scatter over an area of more than 2,000 feet. If this story is leaving you stunned at how a trained crew could ignore so many warnings, go ahead and hit that like button right now. And please stay subscribed, because the investigation findings reveal systemic problems that changed how airlines train pilots worldwide. Share this with anyone who has ever wondered how plane crashes happen, because understanding these failures is how we prevent them. The destruction is nearly total. Of the 254 people aboard, 228 die, including all 3 flight crew members and 11 of the 14 cabin crew. Only 26 people survive, most of them pulled from the wreckage with severe injuries. The survivors are found in sections of the fuselage that remained partially intact during the breakup. Local emergency services, alerted by the flash of the explosion, rushed to the scene. But the crash site is on a hillside in dense jungle. Access is difficult. Rain continues to pour. Fires burn in multiple sections of wreckage. Rescuers work through the night, searching for survivors, but most of what they find are bodies and scattered debris. The investigation that follows, conducted by the United States National Transportation Safety Board, with assistance from Korean authorities and Boeing, is exhaustive. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder are recovered and analyzed. What they reveal is damning. The cockpit voice recorder captures the entire final approach. It records Captain Park's errors in programming the flight management computer. It records First Officer Song's increasingly desperate attempts to get the captain to go around, starting with subtle hints and escalating to direct pleas. It records Flight Engineer Nam adding his voice, urging the captain to climb. It records the ground proximity warning screaming for 26 seconds before impact while the captain continued to descend. And it records the final moment of impact, the sounds of the aircraft striking terrain, then silence. The flight data recorder shows the aircraft descended well below the minimum descent altitude without the runway in sight. It shows the aircraft was not aligned with the runway. It shows that when the ground proximity warning activated, the captain did not add power or initiate a climb. The data proves beyond any doubt that this was a controlled flight into terrain, an aircraft that was functioning normally flown by pilots into the ground. The investigation determines multiple factors contributed to the accident. Captain Park was fatigued, which degraded his performance and judgment. He made errors in programming the navigation system. He failed to maintain proper altitude during the approach. He descended below minimums without the runway in sight. He ignored the ground proximity warning. He refused to execute a go-around despite repeated calls from his crew. But the investigation also identifies a crucial cultural factor. The hierarchical nature of Korean cockpit culture made it extremely difficult for First Officer Song and Flight Engineer Nam to effectively challenge Captain Park's dangerous decisions. They tried repeatedly, but their training and cultural background made it nearly impossible for them to forcefully take control or override the captain's authority. In Korean culture, directly contradicting a superior, especially in a way that causes them to lose face, is considered deeply disrespectful. Junior crew members are trained to defer to senior captains. This creates what aviation safety experts call a steep authority gradient, where captains have enormous power and junior officers struggle to speak up even when safety is at risk. The accident investigators found that Korean Air had a pattern of accidents and incidents related to poor crew resource management and steep authority gradients. This was not an isolated case. It was a symptom of systemic cultural issues in how Korean Air trained and operated their crews. In the aftermath of this tragedy, Korean Air underwent massive changes. The airline brought in outside experts, including David Greenberg, a renowned aviation safety consultant, to completely overhaul their training and operational procedures. They implemented comprehensive crew resource management training focused on reducing authority gradients and empowering junior officers to speak up. They changed their cockpit language from Korean to English, which helped reduce cultural hierarchies, since English does not have the same formal and informal speech patterns that Korean does. They instituted policies requiring captains to explicitly invite input from first officers during critical phases of flight. They trained crews to use assertive language when safety is at stake, to say, "I am taking control," rather than asking permission. The changes worked. Korean Air's safety record improved dramatically. The airline went from being on the verge of being banned from many countries due to safety concerns to becoming one of the safer carriers in Asia. But it took the deaths of 228 people to force those changes. For the broader aviation industry, this accident reinforced the critical importance of the stabilized approach concept. Airlines now mandate that if an approach is not stabilized by a specific altitude, typically 1,000 feet above the ground, a go-around must be executed. No exceptions. No trying to salvage it, no pressing on hoping it will work out. The accident also led to enhanced ground proximity warning systems. Modern terrain awareness systems provide more advanced warning and are harder to ignore. They display terrain graphically on navigation screens and provide earlier alerts when aircraft are approaching obstacles. For me personally, this accident represents everything wrong with the ego-driven approach to aviation. Captain Park's refusal to go around was not based on any rational assessment of the situation. It was pride. It was stubbornness. It was an unwillingness to admit he had made errors, and that pride killed 228 people. I have executed go-arounds dozens of times in my career, sometimes because of unstable approaches, sometimes because of weather, sometimes because another aircraft was slow to clear the runway, sometimes because a warning light illuminated at a critical moment. Every single time it was the right decision. Every single time I landed safely on the next attempt. There is no shame in a go-around. None. It is a normal procedure. It is built into every approach briefing. Fuel is allocated for it. Air traffic control expects it. Passengers may be slightly inconvenienced by a few extra minutes in the air, but they will survive. Refusing to go around when it is clearly necessary, that can kill everyone. To any pilot reading this, if your approach is unstable, go around. If you do not have the runway in sight at minimums, go around. If your first officer is calling for a go-around, listen to them. If the ground proximity warning activates, go around immediately. Your ego is not worth more than the lives in the back of your aircraft. And to first officers and junior crew members, you have not just the right, but the responsibility to call for a go-around when safety requires it. If your captain refuses, you need to be prepared to take control. Say clearly and firmly, "I have control." Add power. Pitch up. Climb away. Your career will survive. Everyone aboard will survive. And any captain who punishes you for preventing a crash is not worthy of sitting in that left seat. Korean Air Flight 801 flew into a hillside because one man refused to admit he needed to try again. 228 people died because pride overrode procedure. The runway was right there, less than 3 miles away. They could have climbed, gone around the pattern, and landed safely 5 minutes later. Instead, they flew into terrain that killed nearly everyone aboard. The cockpit voice recorder captured Captain Park's final words, spoken seconds before impact, as he finally realized his error. Just 2 words. "Oh no." That was it. The recognition came too late. The aircraft was already striking trees. By the time he understood what was happening, there was no time to save it. First Officer Song and Flight Engineer Nam died trying to save that aircraft, calling for a go-around, pleading with their captain to climb. They did everything they could within the cultural constraints they operated under. They were heroes who deserved better than to die because their captain refused to listen. This accident changed aviation safety forever, but it took 228 lives to make it happen. If you learned something important from this story, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more real aviation disaster investigations. Give this video a like to help more people understand why go-arounds are not optional, and share it with anyone who flies, because knowing these stories might help them recognize and speak up about dangerous situations. Your engagement helps me continue bringing you these critical lessons from aviation history. I am Captain Paul Henderson. Thank you for staying with me through this difficult story. Remember that there is never shame in a go-around, but there is tragedy in false pride. Listen to your crew, respect the procedures, and when the approach is not working, climb away and try again. Fly safe, always be ready to go around, and never let pride override safety. Until next time, this is Captain Paul Henderson signing off.